Welcome back to the channel. In this video I'll be installing a 2-channel dash camera into a 2017 Kia Soul Plus, which is the second generation version of the Kia Soul. And the camera that I've selected and purchased with my own money is a VIOFO A129 Duo, which is, here's the front camera. It has a GPS mount which actually mounts to the windshield for the GPS information. And then also here's the second camera. So this bundle, part of the bundle includes those cameras and the wiring necessary to get them connected. The bundle I purchased has these additional items here, which we'll go through after the introduction and information disclaimer. So if you find this information useful to you, please hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. It's free to you, and it just requires a Google account, which is also free if you don't have one already. So let's get to work. Please review the automotive information, repair, and modification guidelines on this screen. Seek the advice of a repair professional if you're unsure how to perform any repair or modification safely and correctly. All repairs and modifications are performed at your own risk. Here are the topics that are going to be covered in this video. First off, we're going to go through the process of identifying the power source or fuse locations to properly power the VIOFO 3-wire power adapter. The steps shown are in a 2017 Kia Soul Plus, but the general concepts apply to any vehicle. I'm going to show you the routing of the power adapter cable and the location of the power adapter itself on the dashboard, and then the thought process behind my routing of the rear camera cable in this 2017 Kia Soul Plus. I'm going to show you the menu system that's on the front camera to show you the various options that can be configured in a very quick sense, and then I'm going to go through the iOS application to configure the final options on the camera. Again, this is a quick overview. A separate video will cover detailed review of the camera and application usage. Make sure you check out the description section of this video for additional information on this camera, and I'll also include clickable links to the various sections of this video to make it easier to move to a particular section if you're interested in that section. We'll be installing this 2-channel dash camera configuration into this 2017 Kia Soul Plus. The second generation of the Kia Soul has a fuse box in the dashboard to the left of the steering column, and we'll be taking advantage of that location since it does have switched and unswitched fuses in that fuse box. And we need switch and unswitched because this is a parking mode capable camera, and the power supply for this is also the 3-wire version that supports parking modes. So we need those two particular power supply types, the switched and unswitched. So in this particular bundle, it actually gives you 2 packages of fuse add a tap or add a fuse configurations here for the different fuse styles that are out there in various vehicles. So we have the style necessary for the Kia Soul in here, which is great. This particular bundle should cover every type of vehicle out there. But again, whenever you tap into a fuse, you want to make sure that the fuse is not for something critical on the vehicle, such as airbags or powertrain control modules, anything that's of high safety or performance feature of the vehicle. Find unused fuses, such as blank locations that have power, or ones that power some things that are either not present in the vehicle or low criticality, such as like a power adapter port or something like that. So when we get into the dashboard area, we'll try to find those 2 types, the switch and unswitch, in the low criticality locations, and get that installed, and then route it up to the headliner where we're going to be installing the front camera, which will be on the passenger side behind the center rear view mirror. The rear camera, I believe, we'll be putting right under where the third brake light resides, but that does require us to run the cable that goes from the front camera to the rear camera through a variety of trim panel locations. I'm going to try to run it on the lower section. I want to make sure I want to avoid the airbags as much as possible. And whenever you run any cabling near an airbag, make sure you never run it over the top of, because when the airbag deploys, you don't want the wire that you put in place to be obstructing the proper operation of the airbags. Make sure you leave them alone as much as possible. And if you do have to run anything near them, make sure you're behind them and not obstructing anything necessary for the airbag to operate correctly. So let's get into the vehicle, figure out how we're going to tap into the fuse box, and also how we're going to run the power supply for that. We're now taking a look at the fuse box that's on the left side of the steering column in the US version of the Kia Soul. And I've removed the plastic panel, which also exposes the OBD2 port which we're not working with at all for this particular project, but just for your knowledge, this is where it's located. And then the fuse box that we're working with is back here. Down here on the lower right, we have a sunroof 1 and a sunroof 2, which are hot all the time, but there is a spare one right here which is hot all the time. And based on my testing so far, a low criticality feature would be a heated steering wheel, and that is right here. So I'm going to choose that as my switched power source, and I'm going to now pull out the fuses and then see how we can add in the add a tab, add a fuse supplied in the kit. I've started the engine to confirm that the heated steering wheel does get power, which it should. It didn't have power when the engine was off, so now I'm going to turn the ignition off, and it does go off. And I'm just going to turn it on to accessory to see if that's enough. No. And I press one more time to have it go on to on without starting the engine. It is powered. So that's the behavior I'm looking for, is to have it on only when the ignition is on or the engine is running. So let's go with that one. So let's go ahead and pull the number 10 amp fuse, which is spare 1, which is located here. And then the heated steering wheel is a 15 amp, which is the third one down from the top on the left here, second row. So in the bundle we have this add a tap fuse configuration that corresponds to the fuse type in the Kia Soul, and I'm going to plug this in, and then I'm going to check which one is supplying the 12 volt power. Or actually I might be able to do that right now with my probe. So I'm going to take the tip and just touch the contacts on the right side. Yes. On the left side, no. So the hot side is the right side in the picture at this point. The reason that I wanted to know which side of the fuse received the power from the vehicle is because when we add an add a tap, add a fuse configuration like this, you want to plug in the right side of this unit into the side that supplies the power, because that is the power supply into the right side here, and then the fuse goes across the bridge across to the left, which then goes into the fuse panel that's already there, and then also the fuse for the external circuit that you're adding goes out here. So you want the hot coming into the rightmost leg here, and it just so happens on this particular fuse box it's also on the right. So when we add this back in, we're going to orient it in that orientation. So we're going to take the original 10 amp fuse from the vehicle, put it on the inner part, which is what will complete the circuit here. So that's the 10 amp is back into its original location. And then we'll add the external fuse necessary for the circuit that we're adding. They supplied 15 amps with these. I may reduce that because the power adapter does not require that for the dash camera. We're now checking the source of the 12 volts in this particular second row for the heated steering wheel, and it looks like it might be on the other side, the left. So let's check the left supply. Yes, and the light's on. And on the right side, nope, just the left. All right, so we know that we have to orient the add a tap to have that right leg of the add a tap on the left side of this particular fuse location. This is the kit supplied power adapter, which is the 3-wire power adapter. And this is the long cable which will run up through the A-pillar and then the headliner to get to the front camera, which terminates with a USB connection. Here is the center module that allows you to configure the voltage for cutting off. It has 11.8, 12 even, 12.2, and 12.4.
It was on 11.8. I'm going to be a little more conservative depending on how accurate it is. So all the way to the right is 12.4. I'm going to go 12.2 and see how much parking mode time that gives the camera, and that way we don't go too low if this monitoring's any amount off from the selected value. So we'll have that. And then of course we have the wires coming out of that, which have the 3 that we need to connect. One to the ground. It looks like there's a bolt over here that's mounted to the metal, which is connected to the body of the vehicle. So that looks like an excellent candidate for the ground. And then of course we have the yellow here, which goes to the accessory, which is the switched volts, 12 volt supply, which I've selected the heated steering wheel supply. And then we have the red here, which goes to the battery 12 volt supply, which is the spare fuse that I tapped into. So with those, I have to add that connector to it so that it will plug into the add a tap successfully. So it has this half already on the fuse side of it, so we have to put these on. I will add them on, and I probably will add some solder to them. Crimp style connectors I'm a little leery of. Just old age makes me leery of them, so I will make sure that I add some solder to each of these just to make sure they're fully connected, and then we'll come back and get this mounted up to get the wiring up to the camera. The power adapter is now installed. I have the add-a-tap fuse taps in place. This was the spare fuse, which I had the positive come in out of this side of the fuse panel. So that goes into the right side of the add-a-tap. And then I've got the switched power here on the heated steering wheel fuse. And the source for the power on that one was on the left-hand side, so that's why the orientation is opposite for those two. So that the new fuses that are being added are not drawing through the original fuses, they're just drawing power straight from the fuse box itself. And then on the side here, we'll move over to take a look at the mounting location there. We can now see I used the bolt there on the crash bar, support bar for the dash as the ground location, and then the power adapter here with the slide switch available here so I can adjust the voltage if I so desire. And the wiring is located here in a bundle with zip tied. I put some soft-sided Velcro on the metal here just in case there were any rub points that I didn't see, and zip tied in place. And I'm going to run the power adapter line for the camera up the A-pillar. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the main camera out. I'm going to test the functionality of the power adapter at this point before we go any further. I'm now going to perform a power adapter test to make sure that the power adapter we just configured is functional. So I'm going to take the front camera, and I've routed the cable for the rear camera to the rear camera. And I'm now going to insert the microSD card on the side here. I have a 128 gigabyte high endurance card that I'm using. And then I'm going to connect the power to the USB connection port here. The power adapter cable coming in from the device we just installed. So I'm going to turn on the ignition and see if we get a power up event for our camera. I do see a power red light for record. Usually these have a delayed boot. And there's the VIOFO screen. Please format the card, which we're going to do. So I believe this is menu over here, sorry. And now I'm going to go to, what version do we have right now? It's 1.5. So I'm going to go and confirm what firmware is available for this. So let's go up to format. All right. So let's go ahead and get out of the menu. And the red record light is blinking, so it is writing, it looks like it's 1080p plus 1080p front and rear. we have a cover over it here. So there's the front camera. Let's put that on for now to protect it again. And let's there's the rear camera. Okay. Back to okay. Well, so far it's working. Now I'm going to turn off the ignition. We haven't configured anything yet, so it just completely turned off, so that's to be expected. So I'm going to go take the microSD card out now and go check the firmware version, put the new one on there, which I don't know, that may be already at the higher version, but we'll check it and then start the recording again here when we get the microSD with the updated firmware file in it. I've got the upgrade file on the microSD card. The record light flashing like that quickly is supposed to indicate, I believe, the fact that it's upgrading the firmware based on the older cameras. So we'll let it perform that function. It looks like it's rebooting. And again, we're talking to both cameras and hit menu. Alright, let's go to version. So it is the same version that I had there before, so it looks like this camera was already upgraded by the vendor that sold it, or was manufactured and it had the firmware upgrade already installed. So 1.5 is the latest as this recording is being created for YouTube. So with that, we'll go through, we can take a look at some of the other features in here as well. Time zone, boot delay, screensaver, how long to keep the screen on, whether to record audio, camera, GPS info stamp, date stamp, the Wi-Fi information, which is new to this camera. My other cameras from VIOFO do not have Wi-Fi. What type of sensitivity for the G sensor, whether you want it to be, whether you want the GPS on, which we do. And then you get into the types of recording for parking mode, and right now parking mode is probably off. So there's some event detection, time-lapse at 1 frame per second, 2 frames per second. So we'll go through that. That's per your preference, but you can see that this does support parking mode. Right now it's off. That's why it just turns off when the power is turned off. And the resolution you can pick, but with the two camera it's 1080p for both on this camera. And back to that screen. So the camera appears to be functional at front and rear, so we know we are starting with a good combination of units to start cabling the rest of the car. So let's run the power cable and the rear camera cable up the A-pillar and through the headliner to the center rear view mirror area. Well, welcome back to day 2 of this project. I had to terminate yesterday's installation efforts because the heat in the garage was going over 100 to 110 degrees with no real chance of cooling it down till late at night. So we pushed this out to the next day. Glad I did, because the weather's much cooler today. So we'll accomplish the completion of this task today, I hope. So what I'm doing right now is I've prepped the inside of the car for the cabling. As we saw yesterday, I got the power adapter tapped into the fuse block. And today I'm going to be tackling the routing of the wiring, and I have to decide which path I'm taking to the back of the vehicle, and that's why I want to make sure I get the front side of this in place so I know how much actual length I have of the cable that runs to the rear of the vehicle for the rear camera. I hope to be able to run it underneath or on the bottom side here so I can avoid the whole airbag situation, but depending on how exactly long this cable is, looks like it might be a little close. It might actually work by routing it below, but I want to
have an accurate measurement of this with the cabling already accounted for up in the headliner up to the camera. So I know how much I can go down the A-pillar, down through the bottom of the door trims, and then up through the C-pillar in the back there, and then up to the tailgate, and then out the rubber connector that goes between the body and the tailgate to then route to the location where the third brake light is. I'll have to cut into that cover a little bit to expose the wire to come out to the camera. But I need to get this done up here to see where the routing, how much the routing up here will consume of the cable before I can figure out whether I can do the low path or the high path through the headliner. I can do the high path through the headliner. I just prefer not to be by the airbags if I can avoid it, but if it's necessary, then I'll of course then route it behind the curtain airbags on the way back to the back of the vehicle. So let's take a look and see what we got. I've run the cables that were wrapped in the foam protective padding from the A-pillar area over to the center rearview mirror area. I had to remove the screw from the clip and also the sun visor to allow the extra space behind the headliner to come down, and you can see the two wires, one for power and one for the rear camera. But the blue painter's tape was used as a guide to put the GPS mount on the windshield, and we'll take a look at it from the outside, but it looks pretty good. And again, the passenger here can at least see the screen, or if you want to access that at any point, at least you can see it without grossly moving the center rearview mirror out of the way. And here's the camera view as far as the physical presentation of it from the driver's location, and it's basically completely hidden from line of sight, so it's not obstructing your view while driving. The routing of the power cable and rear camera cable down the A-pillar and securing the cables to the A-pillar was a little more challenging than I had hoped. The clip at the top of the A-pillar plastic trim is for the airbag deployment purpose, basically to let it move out of the way as the airbag deploys. So you can't really remove that easily without replacing the clip. So I then tried to route the cables down the A-pillar using the 3M adhesive backed clips that were supplied in the camera kit, and they are just not large enough to hold both cables. So I ended up using an old trick of mine, using some soft-sided industrial Velcro, using the adhesive side of the soft-sided Velcro to adhere the two cables to the A-pillar metal, the painted surface, and in between the airbag wiring and the center portion where the plastic clip is that secures the center portion of the plastic trim for the A-pillar. That was a good routing solution for this, and I was then able to take the wiring down the A-pillar to the side of the dash. I now have the power routing completed and the excess cable wrapped up in that bundle there and zip tied in a loop and secured to the dashboard mounting bracket there. So that's all taken care of. And now as far as the route for the rear camera wire cable, I'm going to run it down the floorboard area here along the trim panels. And let's open up the rear door here, and you can see with the blue tape where I'm having to run it, and then back up into the cargo area. And of course I'm running it up, and on the back side here I should have access to the wiring harness area for this rubber protective grommets for the wiring cable to go through, and then run it up here to the center. I will have to make a notch in this plastic area, which is your access panel for your third brake light, so that I can bring it out without breaking the plastic, and then the camera will be residing somewhere right in here. So that's the plan. Let's see how the execution goes. So now let's talk about the rear camera cable, because that of course comes from the front camera, and we still have to route it all the way to the back. And that's where the project got a little more ambitious than I was hoping for, because you can see the simple trim that I removed here. I zip tied it into the existing zip ties that they were using wherever possible. I don't want to add any extra stress on the wiring cables that they have in the vehicle. But then let's look at the horror story back here. I had to basically take out the seats and to get the trim panels out to allow me to route the cable to the back area here, because again it goes to the bottom of the door area, and then we're routing up here And then again, the yellow zip ties are mine that I added to route it up. And then this is the harness that goes up into this enclosure here for water leak prevention. And I routed it up there, and then I brought it up here. Ended up drilling an additional hole, 7/16, put a rubber grommet on it to bring this cable out. And I had to trim the edges just a little bit to, at 7/16, this was just a little too big to get through there. So just took off the edges just a little bit to get it through the hole. And of course we have the rear camera. This particular piece pops off and has 4 plastic pins that hold it in, and it's pretty easy to get it to. But that's the routing I chose. I wanted to make sure I stayed away from the airbag area if at all possible. Of course, that necessitated the removal of all of this. So it's a bit of a challenge if you want to try to do it right and route it. You can, you know, like I did, if you want to try to just stuff it into plastic, you can probably pull out these pieces a little bit and try to stuff it in, but you might end up having rattles of the cable flopping around, so I tried to avoid that. So to me, it was worth the extra effort. Again, down on the bottom there, you can see where those yellow zip ties are. And then I took advantage of a couple of the existing clips there, which I believe are for the fuel door release cable. And then I brought it up to the wiring harness up here, and then up and out. So with that, I need to get this car back together. It's gonna take me probably 20-30 minutes to get this back together. The thing that I want to caution about this is when you remove these pieces, some of the metal clips will like to stay in the metal pieces here, in the holes that they go into. So if you do this, make sure you examine the plastic piece, make sure all the clips are pulled out from it, and if not, you have to extract them and put them back in place before you reinsert the plastic piece. So after this, we'll take a look at the quick operation in the vehicle, and from there, let me get busy putting the car back together first, and then I'll join you back after I get that done. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the iOS application. You turn on the Wi-Fi by pressing the right button with a long press. You join the Wi-Fi network, which has a default password of 123456778. And then once you've joined the network, you go into the application. You must stop recording to change settings, and then you can go through and change the various settings to configure your camera. And I set up for time-lapse with 2 frames per second. I'm going through and turning on various features, setting the boot delay to 5 seconds, setting the frequency to 60 Hertz, and I also will be setting the time zone, which I set to GMT plus 7, which is wrong. It should be GMT minus 7, and you must change that for daylight savings time switches. So you can also use this to configure the aiming of the camera. So use the live view to aim the camera correctly, front and rear. And that's a quick overview of the iOS application for the VIOFO cameras. Here's some sample footage captured by the A129 Duo front camera. I've intentionally blurred the geolocation, so in case you're wondering. It's pretty good detail in motion and while still, so I do have the polarizing filter on the front, but I do not have one on the rear, so we may add one to the rear camera. It's the same filter, but detail is pretty good overall, and it's certainly worth having front and rear because nice crisp image in case something occurs on the road. Here's the parking mode footage at 2 frames per second, so it's pretty low detailed as far as individual frames, but you can capture the overall idea of what's going on. And here's the rear camera. And I have blurred some of the license plates, just in case you're wondering, in addition to the geolocation information. Check out the video description for more information and links related to this camera. It's a good low-cost dual camera setup and it supports parking mode with the 3-wire VIOFO power adapter installed. Initial tests show that it captures at least 9 hours of parking mode video when configured at 12.2 volts cutoff value, and it's good at video image quality based on the samples that we've seen. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, smash that like button. If this is the first time you stop by the channel, please click the subscribe button to the right. It's free. Click that bell notification to get notified when I upload new videos. Follow Retro Car Guy 530 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. Thanks for coming to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.